Lights on. Watch your step. Jesus, what is this?
They're in a circle. 3 of them. Candles still burning. Symbols on the walls. But where's the leader? Where's Kane?
Bodies are cold. No signs of struggle. Looks like a ritual. But who was running it?
April 9, 2017. Police in the quiet town of Ashwood entered an abandoned farmhouse just before dawn. Inside, they discovered 3 bodies, each laid carefully on the floor in a circle, candles flickering around them. Strange markings covered the walls. And in the middle of it all, an empty chair, as if someone was supposed to be sitting there. The 3 victims were members of a group known locally as the Circle. But their leader, Elias Kane, the man neighbors whispered about, the man who had drawn dozens into his secretive teachings, was nowhere to be found. Was this a ritual gone wrong? A suicide pact? Or something far darker? Tonight, we unravel the mystery of the Ashwood Circle, and reveal its deadly secret. But this isn't just a story. It's a challenge. As you listen, you'll be presented with suspects, motives, and clues. Some will mislead you. Some will reveal the truth, if you're paying close attention. At the end, we'll uncover what really happened. But before then, I want you to test your detective instincts. Follow the evidence. Question every story. Watch for the details hiding in plain sight. Because by the time this story is over, you'll either feel like you solved it, or realize you missed what was there all along. Ashwood is a small town tucked into the hills of Vermont. A place of quiet streets, family-owned diners, and a church bell that still rings every Sunday morning. But behind the ordinary life of this town lay whispers of something darker. It began 5 years earlier, when Elias Kane arrived. A man in his late 40s, charming, soft-spoken, with an unsettling intensity in his gaze. He introduced himself as a spiritual teacher, offering meditation circles and guidance for those searching for purpose. At first, it looked harmless. A group of 10, then 20, gathering weekly in the woods outside town. Singing, chanting, meditating. But slowly, the circle, as Kane called it, grew more secretive. Meetings stretched into the night. Members cut ties with old friends. Some quit their jobs, devoting themselves entirely to Kane. Locals began to talk. Strange lights in the woods. Fires that burned until dawn. Chants echoing across the valley. And then, the rumors. That Kane wasn't just a teacher. That he controlled his followers. That his rituals weren't just about peace, but power. The 3 found dead in the farmhouse were Lydia Grant, 29, once a schoolteacher. She left her job a year before, telling co-workers Kane had shown her a higher path. Mark Reeves, 34, a mechanic, divorced, known for drinking too much until he joined the circle and suddenly found discipline. Naomi Ellis, 22, the youngest, quiet, a college dropout. Her parents said she became withdrawn after meeting Kane, spending all her time at the compound. Each of them had devoted themselves completely to Elias Kane. And each of them was found lying dead in a perfect circle, palms upward, eyes closed as if asleep. But here's the strangest detail: toxicology showed no drugs, no poison. No trauma on their bodies. Cause of death, undetermined. If there was no poison, no wounds, no obvious cause of death, what does that suggest to you? Did they die willingly, through some hidden ritual? Or did someone find another way to silence them? Elias Kane. The man at the center of it all. He grew up in a different state, drifting from job to job, before surfacing in Ashwood with stories of travel, philosophy, and enlightenment. He told followers he had seen visions. That he had pierced the veil. That if they followed him, they too could transcend ordinary life. To some, Kane was magnetic. To others, he was terrifying. A local pastor said, "He looked at you like he could see your soul. But I didn't see peace in his eyes. I saw hunger." When police searched Kane's cabin after the farmhouse discovery, they found journals filled with strange writings, prophecies, sketches of symbols, and repeated phrases like, "The circle is not yet complete." But Elias Kane himself? Gone. Vanished without a trace. When a leader disappears while his followers are found dead, do you assume he's a victim too? Or the one pulling the strings? As detectives dug deeper, four possible suspects, or at least people of interest, emerged. Elias Kane, the leader, did he orchestrate a deadly ritual and vanish to cover his tracks? Rebecca Lowe, the survivor, a member of the circle who left weeks before the deaths. Did she know something? Or take revenge for what Kane had done to her? Pastor Michael Hale, the town preacher, a vocal opponent of the circle, who clashed with Kane publicly. Did his crusade against the cult go further than words? Jonathan Ward, the landowner, the farmhouse where the bodies were found belonged to him. He claimed he rented it out to Kane for meetings. But why was he receiving monthly cash deposits from an unknown account? Each had connections. Each had reasons to hide the truth. Which of these names makes your instincts tingle? The manipulative leader? The ex-member with a grudge? The pastor at war with the cult? Or the landowner quietly profiting on the side? Detectives faced a puzzle. 3 dead, no clear cause, 1 leader vanished. The farmhouse was sealed, evidence bagged. Journals, candles, ropes, and a single tape recorder left behind. The tape? An eerie recording of chants, ending with silence. But no voice of Kane. No cries. No explanation. The mystery of the Ashwood Circle had only just begun. Elias Kane wasn't just a teacher, he was a manipulator. Survivors of the circle described how Kane slowly tightened his grip on their lives. At first, meetings were about meditation, breathing exercises, and self-discovery. Members said they felt calm, uplifted, even healed. But over time, Kane introduced stricter rules. No phones. No outside friendships. He encouraged followers to quit jobs, cut ties with families, and give their earnings to the work. One former member recalled, "He told us the world was poisoned. That only the circle could save us. He said if we left, our souls would never ascend." Kane's words didn't just guide, they trapped. Would you see this as harmless spirituality gone too far? Or the calculated control of a dangerous man? Rebecca Lowe was one of the few who escaped the circle before the deaths. She was 26, once a nurse, drawn in by Kane's promises of healing and purpose. But within months, she realized something was wrong. She described nights where Kane would sit in the farmhouse, chanting until dawn, surrounded by candles and symbols. He told members that only he could shield them from the darkness pressing in. Rebecca said, he wasn't teaching anymore. He was commanding. And people obeyed without question. I had to get out before I lost myself completely. Weeks later, 3 of her former friends were found dead in that same farmhouse. But here's the twist, Rebecca admitted she had been at the farmhouse just 2 nights before the tragedy. She said she went back to warn her friends. Detectives wondered, was she telling the truth? Or did she play a role in what came next? Pastor Michael Hale of Ashwood's only church had clashed with Kane from the very beginning. He preached sermons calling the circle a den of devils. He warned families that Kane was leading young people astray. And he claimed Kane had threatened him directly, saying, "The church's time is over. The circle is the new truth." When asked about the deaths, Hale didn't hide his disdain. "That man was dangerous. I told everyone. I told the police. And now, 3 lives are gone because no one listened." But detectives noticed something odd. Hale's church donations had spiked in the weeks before the tragedy, large, anonymous contributions. Where had the money come from? Could the pastor have had dealings with the cult he claimed to despise? Do you think Hale was a sincere whistleblower? Or could his hatred of Kane have pushed him to intervene violently? Jonathan Ward, owner of the farmhouse, seemed like an innocent landlord at first. He said Kane paid him cash each month to rent the property. He claimed he never knew what went on inside. But bank records told another story. Jonathan was receiving monthly deposits, larger than the rent Kane admitted to paying. Thousands more, from an unknown source. When pressed, Jonathan grew defensive. He muttered, "I don't ask questions. Money's money." But if Jonathan wasn't asking questions, was it because he already knew the answers? Would you see Jonathan as a greedy bystander profiting off tragedy, or someone deeply entangled in the cult secret? In the journals found at Kane's cabin, detectives uncovered more disturbing writings. One passage read, "Three shall fall, so the circle may rise. Their silence will be the seed. I will be the voice that remains." Another, "The chosen will lay down willingly. The unchosen will scatter. And I will ascend." These weren't the words of a man seeking peace. They were the ravings of someone planning something. But here's the detail that puzzled investigators. Kane mentioned 3, and exactly 3 members were found dead. Had he predicted their deaths? Or planned them? When prophecy lines up with tragedy, do you call it coincidence, or premeditation? One of the most disturbing pieces of evidence came from the farmhouse itself, the tape recorder. The tape began with low chanting. Dozens of voices repeating Kane's phrases. Then, his voice rising, "The time has come. The 3 shall be chosen." But near the end, the chanting falters. There's a gasp. Then silence. The tape clicks off. No cries. No struggle. Just, nothing. Experts said the tape could have been staged. Or maybe the deaths were so sudden, so planned, there was no time for resistance. What do you hear in that silence? A ritual completed? Or a murder carefully concealed? As news spread, Ashwood divided. Some swore Kane had killed his followers. Others believed the victims chose their fate, brainwashed into submission. And some whispered about Rebecca, that she had returned to settle scores. But through all the noise, one truth was clear: Elias Kane had vanished. No body. No trace. No explanation. And without Kane, the circle's secrets remained locked in shadows. Rebecca Lowe sat down with detectives 2 weeks after the farmhouse discovery. Her hands shook as she spoke, her eyes darting to the corners of the room as if Kane might appear at any moment. She said she had left the circle because she couldn't take the control anymore. But then she admitted something new. Just days before the tragedy, she went back. "I tried to warn them. I told Lydia, Mark, and Naomi they needed to leave. But they wouldn't listen. They said Kane had chosen them. That they had to stay." Rebecca swore she walked out before anything happened. She said she couldn't bear to watch. But detectives noticed her story kept changing. In one interview, she said she left at midnight. In another, she said she left closer to 2 a.m. Which was it? Would you trust Rebecca's testimony? Or do her shifting times suggest she knows more than she's admitting? Rebecca insisted she was home by 2 a.m. on the night of the deaths. But her phone records told another story. At 2:17 a.m., her phone pinged a tower only half a mile from the farmhouse. Not near her home. Not near town. When confronted, Rebecca claimed she had pulled over to cry. But investigators asked, why cry so close to the very place 3 people were about to die? The more Rebecca explained, the less sense it made. Do you believe her excuse, or does it sound like the kind of story someone makes up when they've been caught in a lie? During a search of Rebecca's apartment, detectives discovered a journal tucked beneath her bed. The entries began months earlier, when she was still part of the circle. She wrote about feeling trapped, about Kane's power, about fear of what might come. But the final entry, dated the very night of the farmhouse tragedy, sent chills through investigators. Tonight it happens. Kane says the circle must be sealed. 3 will be chosen. I don't want to see it. But part of me wants it to end. If anyone ever reads this, forgive me. Why would Rebecca write this if she wasn't there? And if she knew what was coming, why didn't she stop it? Would you see this as guilt, or simply a desperate woman confessing her fear? Neighbors near the farmhouse reported something unusual the night of the tragedy. A woman, wearing a dark coat, leaving around 3 a.m. She wasn't running. She wasn't panicked. She was calm. Police sketches, based on vague descriptions, looked eerily like Rebecca. When shown the sketches, Rebecca denied it was her. But the timeline was closing in. Do you believe the neighbors saw Rebecca, or was someone trying to frame her? The investigation uncovered one more detail Rebecca hadn't shared. She and Elias Kane weren't just leader and follower. They had been in a relationship. Phone records showed dozens of late-night calls between them. Texts laced with endearments. And in one message, Kane wrote, "You're the only one who understands the circle is bigger than them." Rebecca denied the relationship, claiming Kane twisted her words. But the evidence was undeniable. Now the question was clear: was Rebecca just another victim, or Kane's partner in something far worse? If Rebecca was truly close to Kane, do you see her as manipulated, or complicit? The audio tape from the farmhouse was replayed, this time with enhanced sound. At the very end, just before the silence, a faint voice could be heard. A woman's whisper, "It's time." Experts cleaned the audio, compared it to Rebecca's voice. The match wasn't perfect, but it was close. Rebecca swore it wasn't her. But her protests grew weaker as the evidence piled up. Would you hear that whisper as Rebecca's voice? Or could it have been someone else entirely? Just as detectives prepared to move forward with Rebecca as their prime suspect, a new piece of evidence came to light. A set of fingerprints on one of the farmhouse candles, belonging not to Rebecca, not to Elias Kane, not to any of the victims, but to Pastor Michael Hale. The man who had sworn he wanted nothing to do with the circle. The man who had condemned it from the pulpit. Suddenly, suspicion shifted. If Hale had been inside the farmhouse, what was he doing there? What do you make of this? Was Hale secretly entangled with the circle, or does this prove he had something to hide? With Rebecca's contradictions and Hale's fingerprints, the case was spinning in a new direction. The town grew restless. Some demanded Rebecca's arrest. Others pointed to Hale as a hypocrite hiding behind faith. And through it all, one question remained unanswered: where was Elias Kane? The leader who started it all was still missing. And until he was found, the mystery of the Ashwood Circle was far from solved. Studio microphone: The Ashwood Circle. Detectives confronted Pastor Michael Hale with the fingerprint evidence. At first, he laughed it off. Impossible. I've never set foot in that farmhouse. Why would I? But when shown the lab results, Hale's expression faltered. He admitted he had been there, but only once. He claimed he visited weeks before the tragedy, after hearing rumors that young people were being held there. I wanted to see it for myself. To warn them. To pull them out. That's all. But if Hale was telling the truth, why hadn't he mentioned it earlier? And why were his prints on a candle, an object used in the very ritual where 3 people died? Would you believe Hale's excuse? Or does his secrecy suggest deeper involvement? Investigators dug into Hale's finances. Church donations had surged in the months before the tragedy. Anonymous envelopes left in the collection box, always in cash. Hale swore it was generosity from the town. But bank records showed the deposits matched the same weeks Kane rented the farmhouse. Could it be possible? Was Kane secretly paying Hale to stay quiet? Or worse, to cover for him? If Hale was taking money connected to Kane, was he an enemy of the cult, or an accomplice in disguise? News of Hale's fingerprints rocked Ashwood. Some townsfolk defended him. He's our pastor. He's guided us for years. He'd never be part of this. Others weren't so sure. If he hated Kane so much, why were his hands all over that place? The church pews grew emptier. Whispers spread at the diner. For the first time, suspicion wasn't on Kane alone, it was on the man who claimed to fight him. Do you think Hale's righteous anger was real, or a mask to hide something darker? As Hale's story cracked, attention swung back to Jonathan Ward, the man who owned the farmhouse. Ward claimed he barely knew Kane. He said he rented the property out, no questions asked. But detectives uncovered evidence that told another story. Bank statements showing cash deposits matching the rent. An unsigned lease agreement found in Kane's cabin with Ward's name on it. And most damning, a series of texts between Ward and Kane. One read, "The farmhouse is ready. No one will disturb you there." Why would Ward help Kane secure secrecy? And why was he being paid thousands more than he admitted? Do you think Ward was just greedy, turning a blind eye? Or was he actively helping Kane stage something sinister? A second search of the farmhouse revealed something chilling. Behind a false wall in the basement was a hidden room. Inside, old mattresses, ropes tied to posts, and a single locked trunk. Inside the trunk were dozens of photographs, blurry images of circle members during rituals. And among them, one photo stood out, Elias Kane, seated in the farmhouse, with Jonathan Ward standing right beside him. Ward had claimed he never attended a single meeting. The photo proved otherwise. What does this tell you? Was Ward lying from the start, and if so, why? Detectives soon discovered another connection. Bank transfers linked Jonathan Ward's account to anonymous donations at Hale's church. The money flowed from Kane to Ward to Hale. It looked less like chance, and more like a chain. Kane at the top, Ward as facilitator, Hale as the public face. But if that was true, where did Rebecca fit in? Was she a victim? Or part of the same system? Do you think this was all Kane's design, or were Ward and Hale working together for their own reasons? Just when the case seemed focused on Hale and Ward, a witness stepped forward. An old farmer claimed that on the night of the tragedy, he saw two men leaving the farmhouse around 3:30 a.m. One was tall and broad, resembling Ward. The other was slimmer, hunched, resembling Hale. Neither carried panic. Neither looked rushed. They simply walked into the woods, and vanished. When asked why he didn't come forward earlier, the farmer said, "Who would believe me? Besides, I was afraid." Would you trust the farmer's testimony? Or is it too convenient, coming so late? Through all this, one question loomed larger than ever: where was Elias Kane? If Ward and Hale were both entangled, was Kane pulling their strings from the shadows? Or had they turned against him, staging something for their own gain? The farmhouse deaths had left 3 victims. But the true culprit, or culprits, still remained unclear. At this point, who do you think bears the most guilt? Kane, the vanished leader? Rebecca, the survivor with contradictions? Hale, the pastor with hidden ties? Or Ward, the landlord caught in lies? Detectives brought Jonathan Ward back for questioning. He sat stiffly, eyes darting, sweat on his brow. At first, he repeated the same story: he just rented the farmhouse. He didn't know what Kane was doing inside. But when shown the photo of him standing next to Kane, Ward's facade cracked. "Fine. I went once. Just once. He wanted me there to see the place was safe. That's all. But investigators didn't believe him. His lies were unraveling, one by one. If a man lies about ever being inside, but is caught in a photo standing next to the cult leader, do you think he's just scared, or hiding something far bigger? Detectives followed the paper trail. Ward's accounts showed massive cash deposits, always just before rent was due. The amounts were far larger than the farmhouse's value. Even more damning, some of those deposits came from accounts linked to Circle members, Lydia, Mark, and Naomi, the very ones found dead. Why were they paying Ward directly? It looked less like rent, and more like a payoff. What would you think? Were the members willingly funding Ward as part of Kane's demands, or was Ward extorting them in secret? In Ward's office, investigators found a locked drawer. Inside was a small black ledger. The entries matched the cash deposits. But one name appeared again and again, circled in red ink, E.K. Elias Kane. Next to each entry was a number, amounts that totaled tens of thousands. Ward wasn't just a landlord. He was Kane's banker. If Ward was managing Kane's money, was he just a middleman? Or was he profiting from blood money all along? When confronted with his own link to Ward's money, Pastor Hale broke down. Yes, I took it. But not for me. For the church. I thought, maybe I could turn their darkness into something good. I didn't know people would die. He swore Kane had manipulated everyone. That Ward collected the money, passed it along, and he, Hale, was too weak to say no. But was that the truth? Or just another man caught in Kane's net, trying to shift the blame? Would you see Hale as a coward dragged in against his will, or a willing accomplice who hid behind religion? Rebecca Lowe, when told about the money trail, erupted in anger. That's what it was about? Money? He told us it was about salvation. He told us it was about rising above. All lies. Just money. But her outburst raised another question. If she knew Kane lied, why hadn't she told police sooner? Why hide her relationship with him until they found out on their own? One detective noted quietly, Rebecca always says she wanted out. But every time Kane's name comes up, it's like she's still under his spell. Do you think Rebecca's silence was fear, or lingering loyalty? Investigators searched Kane's abandoned cabin again, this time focusing on hidden spaces. Behind a loose floorboard, they found a sealed envelope. Inside was a photograph, Lydia, Mark, and Naomi, the three who later died. On the back of the photo, in Kane's handwriting, the chosen three. It was dated weeks before the farmhouse tragedy. Would you take this as prophecy, or proof that Kane planned their deaths from the very beginning? In the same envelope was a letter addressed to Ward. When the time comes, ensure the farmhouse is ready. 3 will lie down. You will be rewarded. Trust no one but me. This wasn't just a leader preaching to his flock. This was a man giving orders, expecting obedience. Ward's claim that he was just a bystander was crushed. If you read a letter like that, do you blame the follower for obeying, or the leader for commanding? As evidence stacked higher, one truth emerged: every road led back to Elias Kane. He wasn't just a preacher. He wasn't just a manipulator. He was orchestrating everything: money, loyalty, even death. But Kane was still missing. And with every day that passed, his legend grew. Whispers spread that he was spotted in another state. Others claimed he'd fled the country. Some Circle survivors swore he was still watching them, waiting. The man who promised salvation had left only shadows. Do you think Kane vanished to escape justice, or was he preparing something even worse? At this stage, detectives faced a chilling reality. Ward, the banker, had been moving Kane's money. Hale, the preacher, had taken Kane's donations. Rebecca, the survivor, had been closer to Kane than she admitted. And Kane himself, the leader, had written down exactly what would happen before it did. 3 dead. A town divided. And a mastermind still on the run. The circle wasn't just broken. It was expanding outward, its shadows touching everyone who crossed Kane's path. If you had to choose now, who would you say bears the ultimate guilt? The middleman who obeyed, or the man who commanded it all? Studio microphone. The Ashwood Circle. By the summer of 2017, the search for Elias Kane stretched far beyond Ashwood. Flyers with his face were posted in nearby towns. Anonymous tips poured in, sightings at a gas station, motel, even a bus stop miles away. Each lead fizzled into nothing. But one thing was certain, Kane had prepared for this. He left no digital footprint. No traceable accounts. No paper trail. It was as if he knew exactly how to vanish. When someone disappears this cleanly, do you see luck, or careful planning years in the making? During a re-examination of Kane's cabin, detectives found something overlooked the first time, a wooden box nailed beneath his bed frame. Inside were a dozen cassette tapes, each labeled with dates spanning 6 months before the farmhouse deaths. On the recordings, Kane's voice filled the air. They do not question. They do not resist. Soon, 3 will ascend and I will remain. Their silence is the door, my voice is the key. The tapes revealed how far his manipulation had gone. He rehearsed his sermons. He practiced his chants. He even planned pauses for when his followers were supposed to respond. One chilling line stood out. If they doubt me, I will break them. If they leave, I will silence them. No one escapes the circle. Would you hear this as the ramblings of a madman, or the blueprints of a murderer? When Rebecca was played one of the tapes, she froze. Tears filled her eyes. She whispered, I remember this night. He made Naomi stand in front of everyone and promise she would give herself completely. She cried, but she agreed. Rebecca admitted that Kane didn't just preach, he humiliated, controlled, and broke people down until they obeyed. But then, her voice hardened, and I let him. I stood there. I said nothing. That's why I left. I couldn't bear to watch anymore. Her guilt was real. But so was her silence. Would you see Rebecca as a victim trapped in fear, or as someone who allowed the tragedy to unfold by saying nothing? Just as detectives prepared to arrest Jonathan Ward for fraud and conspiracy, he vanished. His truck was found outside town, engine cold, driver's door wide open. In the seat, his phone and wallet. But no Jonathan. Neighbors said they saw him pacing his yard the night before, muttering to himself, he's coming. He knows. The next morning, he was gone. Had Kane returned to silence him? Or did Ward flee, fearing the truth was closing in? What do you think? Did Ward run because he was guilty, or because he knew Kane would never let him live? With Ward missing, suspicion once again fell on Pastor Hale. Reporters swarmed his church. Parishioners turned away. His sermons grew erratic, filled with anger and desperation. One Sunday, he shouted, "You think you know evil? You don't know Elias Kane. He's still here. He's still watching." That night, police found Hale sitting alone in his office, trembling. On his desk lay a single sheet of paper with the words, "We finish what we start," written in handwriting that looked eerily like Kane's. Do you believe Kane left Hale that note? Or was Hale losing his grip, haunted by his own guilt? Meanwhile, whispers spread that the circle wasn't gone. Survivors gathered in secret. New faces joined, drawn by the mystery. They claimed Kane had promised he would return. That his work wasn't finished. Graffiti began appearing on barns and roadside signs, "The circle is not broken." Even with Kane missing, his shadow still ruled Ashwood. If you lived in this town, would you believe Kane was truly gone, or would you fear he was hiding in plain sight? One of Kane's hidden tapes carried a surprise. Amid his chanting, a second voice could be heard, not a follower, not Rebecca, not Hale. A man's voice, calm, steady, speaking a single line. "It will be done." The voice matched Jonathan Ward. But Ward had disappeared before investigators could confront him. Now the question was clear: had Kane truly been the mastermind, or was Ward more deeply involved than anyone imagined? What do you think? Was Ward a puppet obeying Kane, or a partner in the darkness all along? With Jonathan Ward missing and Pastor Hale unraveling, detectives went back to the evidence: the letters, the tapes, the journals. Piece by piece, the puzzle began to make sense. Ward wasn't just Kane's banker. He was his partner. Hale wasn't just a preacher caught in the crossfire. He was a shield, covering for Kane with pious words while cash changed hands. Rebecca wasn't innocent either. She had been closer to Kane than she admitted, tied to him by fear and obsession. But none of them were the architect. Every arrow pointed back to one man, Elias Kane. On the last cassette tape, never before analyzed in full, Kane's voice delivered his final sermon. "Three shall fall, their silence my foundation. The banker will serve, the preacher will kneel, the chosen will obey. And when the circle is sealed, I will rise beyond them all." And then, a chilling pause. "If they betray me, they will join the dead." It wasn't just prophecy. It was a threat. And perhaps, a promise. If you heard this, would you see Kane as a prophet, or a predator who planned every move years ahead? Forensic experts re-examined the farmhouse and found microscopic traces in the air vents, residue of a powerful sedative gas. It explained the victims' peaceful poses, their closed eyes, their lack of struggle. Kane hadn't needed violence. He had lulled them into sleep, then death. And Jonathan Ward, the landowner, had helped install the ventilation system weeks earlier. The circle's tragedy wasn't ritual at all. It was calculated murder. Does this twist change your theory? Did you suspect chemical poisoning before, or were you convinced it was a ritual all along? Ward's disappearance now looked less like fear, and more like silencing. Searchers found his truck abandoned, but days later, hikers discovered a shallow grave deep in the woods. Inside, Ward's body, shot once in the chest. Ballistics matched a rifle registered to Elias Kane. Ward wasn't missing. He was eliminated. Pastor Hale's fate was different. He confessed under pressure, admitting he accepted Kane's money to fund his failing church. He swore he didn't know about the deaths, but he had seen things, dark things, and chose silence over truth. "I thought I could fight him from inside," Hale wept. "But he used me, like he used them all." Hale was charged with obstruction, his congregation shattered. But he wasn't the killer. He was just another pawn. Rebecca Lowe remained the most complicated. She had been Kane's lover, his confidant, his disciple. She warned her friends but never stopped the ritual. She returned that night, perhaps to bear witness, perhaps to ensure Kane's command was carried out. But when pressed, she whispered, "I was afraid. I still am. He's not done." Was she victim? Accomplice? Or both? In the end, every path led back to Elias Kane. He chose the victims. He orchestrated the finances. He silenced Ward. He vanished before anyone could stop him. The circle wasn't about faith. It wasn't about awakening. It was about power. And Kane wielded it until the very end. But his body was never found. His face never reappeared. His name became a whisper, a warning. The Ashwood farmhouse was demolished. The land overgrown, as if the earth itself wanted to erase what had happened. Rebecca left town. Pastor Hale died years later, a broken man. But rumors persist. Survivors claim they still see symbols carved into trees. That they hear chanting in the woods. That Kane is still out there, waiting for the circle to be reborn. 3 followers dead in a farmhouse. One banker buried in the woods. A pastor corrupted by silence. A survivor haunted by guilt. And a leader who vanished into thin air. The case of the Ashwood Circle is more than a crime. It is a reminder of how power can twist faith into fear, and how darkness can hide behind the face of a savior. So I ask you, did you see it coming? Did you follow the clues to Elias Kane? Or did his shadow mislead you, as it misled them? Because sometimes, evil doesn't need chains or knives. Sometimes, it only needs belief. And in Ashwood, belief was enough to kill. If you want to keep testing your detective instincts with more stories like this, make sure you subscribe to Crimes in Plain Sight. New mysteries await, and next time, the clues might be even harder to spot.